Arthur Curry, aka the Aquaman, has been one of the famous characters of the DC universe. From being one of the founding members of the Justice League, the character has been one of the constant superheroes in the franchise, with significant roles in more than many cases. He might not be as strong as Superman or as technically equipped as Batman, but one cannot walk away from Arthur's rage and strength easily. If you have all gone through the Flashpoint event, you may know how a stubborn and infuriated Aquaman destroyed their world after losing his fight against Wonder Woman. He is half Atlantean and half human, making him savvy in land and water. Arthur carries a bloodline of ancient legendary Atlanteans, and his family tree consists of some exceptionally powerful individuals. So without any further delay, let us dive into today's marvelous video on Aquaman's family tree. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Thomas Curry. Aquaman's father, Thomas Curry, was introduced in 2011's Aquaman Volume 2, Issue 1. He was a lighthouse keeper whose life changed after getting caught in a terrible storm known as the Raging Eye. He was traveling across the ocean, and the catastrophe wrecked his boat completely. However, the Royal Atlantean Atlan intervened and rescued Arthur from his sinking ship. The two eventually fell in love, and they had a son named Arthur Curry. Thomas and Atlan unfortunately could not stay together much longer. Owing to rising political unrest, Thomas and young Arthur had to live in hiding in order to protect themselves from Atlanta's enemies. Thomas and Arthur had a great bond. Thomas traveled the world as much as he could with Arthur to teach him numerous skills and countless activities. But once they returned home, they returned to the lighthouse at Amnesty Bay in hopes of Atlanta returning to them. One day, when Thomas spotted a drowning boat, he swarmed toward them and rescued the crew, including marine biologist Dr. Shin. When Arthur began manifesting his powers, Thomas wanted Dr. Stephen Shin to teach him about marine life. Arthur's true origins were revealed to Dr. Shin, and he began teaching young Arthur how to control his powers and acquire mental control over marine life. The process helped Arthur and amplified Dr. Shin's obsession with Atlantis. Believing Arthur would lead him there one day, Shin wanted Arthur to go public, as it could be the key to finding Atlantis, but Thomas firmly denied it. He was furious about Dr. Shin and tore his lab and all documentation concerning Arthur. Dr. Shin went forward publicly and revealed about Arthur, but the lack of evidence to back up his point made him a joke to the scientific community. Engrossed in humiliation and desperation, Shin reached out to a treasure hunter named Black Manta to get him a small blood sample of Arthur to prove his claims. Black Manta arrived at Arthur's residence and attempted to kill him. Thomas tried his best to save his son, which eventually caused him a heart attack and killed him. After 3 days, Thomas was taken to the hospital, and it was too late. In his final words, Thomas asked Arthur to reach Atlantis and inform Atlanta about everything. He also added to tell Atlanta that he truly loved her. Atlanta was Arthur's mother and the Queen of Atlantis. The character was created by Robert Bernstein and Ramona Frandon and introduced in Aquaman Volume 7, Issue 24. In her youth, she wandered across the undersea, and during one such venture, she encountered Thomas Curry. After a short-lived, peaceful life, she had to depart from her family for their safety. After arriving in Atlantis, she was eventually married to a decorated veteran of the Atlantean Army, Resident Naval Captain Orvax, with whom she gave birth to a son whom they named Orm. Orvax was a highly abusive husband with mental and emotional instability. He hated surface dwellers and often used his confidants to sink human ships, which was also one of the reasons for conflict with Atlanta. Physical assaults became regular and worsened after Orvax told Atlanta about killing Thomas and Arthur on land. In a fit of rage, Atlanta stabbed Orvax with her royal scepter and killed him instantly. When Orm entered the scene, Atlanta lied, stating that his father had been killed by one of his enemies. Later, at some point, Atlanta faked her own death and escaped from Atlantis. She used the Maelstrom warp gates to travel across the world to finally reside in Pacifica. A long time after Arthur and Mera met her, she did not believe Arthur to be her son, as Orvax had vouched for killing both her son and husband on land. However, she broke into tears when Arthur proved himself to be her son. Atlanta used the warp gates to send Arthur and Mera back to Atlantis, but did not choose to return. Through the Shell of Sounds, she sent Arthur a message asking him not to inform Orm that she was alive. Being an Atlantean, Atlanta had superhuman strength, durability, stamina, speed, and reflexes. She also possessed enhanced hearing and sight, along with marine telepathy.
Atlantis has been lying in wait. And now
Orm Marius. Created by Bob Haney and Nick Cardy, Orm Marius was a son of Atlana and Orvax. He was introduced in Aquaman Volume 7, Issue 0, released in November 2012. As a child, Orm was told that he had an older brother from his mother, Atlana, and a surface dweller named Thomas Curry. His conscience and perceptions about the surface dwellers made him believe that his back to Atlantis as the land was hell. He made several attempts to convince the Atlantean Guard to make an expedition on land for Arthur, but it was deemed too dangerous and hence shelved. Atlantean relics and myths charmed Orm the most, and he eventually grew up prioritizing his service to Atlantis above everything. After the death of his abusive father Orvax, when Atlana faked her death to leave Atlantis forever, Orm became the ruler of Atlantis. Atlana's royal advisor Velko blamed Orm for the death of Atlana, following which he was banished to the surface. On land, Velko met Arthur and took him to Atlantis. Orm stepped down as king and offered it to Arthur, and the two brothers developed a healthy relationship. After some time, Arthur gave Orm back his throne and left Atlantis. Orm made several requests for Arthur to remain in Atlantis, but it was all futile. Peace was retained until one day Arthur contacted Orm to inform him that someone from Atlantis had hired Black Manta to attack a US military base, and also that he believed Orm to be behind this. Orm denied all accusations, but the dissent between the two brothers began growing. After one of the testing missiles of the US Army landed accidentally on Atlantis, Orm declared war on the surface dwellers, flooding the coastline cities of Gotham, Metropolis, and Boston, and massacring thousands of its inhabitants. Orm was just about to launch his armies on land before Aquaman arrived to stop him. Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman arrived as well with the intention of taking down Orm. While Aquaman tried reasoning with the Justice League, Batman threw one of his explosives at Orm and ignited the moment. Aquaman tried stopping Superman and Wonder Woman, but when Orm tried killing Batman, he fought him as well. In a moment, the Atlantean army was launched, and Orm banished Superman, Batman, Arthur, and Wonder Woman to the Marianas Trench. As Orm continued his invasion on land, the reserve members of the Justice League, including Hawkman, Black Lightning, and Vixen, stepped in. As the two sides waged war, a devolved kingdom on Atlantis known as the Trench burst out of the sea and attacked the Atlantean forces. It was revealed that it was Velko who was behind it all. The missile that landed on Atlantis before the war began was in fact dropped by Velko, only to witness Arthur challenge Orm and replace him from the throne of Atlantis. The League and Arthur managed to free themselves from the Marianas Trench and arrive at the scene. They informed Orm about Velko, and together they fought the trench and defeated them. At the end of it, Orm was taken into US custody and imprisoned at Belle Reve. Orm's life at Belle Reve was stagnant until the crime syndicate from an alternate reality showed up and destroyed the prison. Orm used the opportunity to root his escape with his crown, royal chainmail, and trident. He planned on returning to Atlantis and reclaiming his throne before he met Aran Shaw. Two prisoners were harassing Aran, and when they insulted Orm, he killed both of them instantly. Aran needed help to save her son, which Orm reluctantly agreed to. Meanwhile, the Justice League defeated the crime syndicate, and years later, Orm could be seen residing with Aran and her child, Tommy. Orm had a happy, peaceful life until the news of the Atlantean Civil War and the presumed death of Arthur arrived. Orm stepped in, siding with Mera and Tula, and the war ended with Mera becoming the queen of Atlantis. Orm's adventures continued, and in several cases, he fought alongside Arthur and the other Atlanteans. Orm possessed all the powers of the Atlanteans, but his unique advantage was his genius-level intellect and tactical analysis. Along with several superhuman abilities, he was an expert in hand-to-hand combat and a master in throwing and using his trident. Tula. The character of Tula was created by Bob Haney and Nick Cardy and showcased in Aquaman Volume 2, Issue 16. She was the outcome of an illegitimate affair between Orvax and an unknown mistress. After Orvax's death, when Orm became the king of Atlantis, she served him as the captain of a covert section of the Atlantean Special Ops Army known as the Drift. Later, when Arthur became the king, she was promoted to regent of Atlantis. She was trusted ally of Arthur, and when the Atlantean extremist Orm Marius ousted Aquaman from the throne, she was arrested. Tula later managed to escape and reside on land at the Curry Lighthouse with Arthur. Later, when Arthur became the king, she she was reappointed the regent of Atlantis, and Orm left to lead the deluge. Eventually, Arthur left Atlantis on her shoulders to serve as Aquaman, during which Orm executed a coup on the throne. Tula left Atlantis and found life among the surface dwellers. Along with the powers of an Atlantean, Tula's specialty was conducting stealth missions and hand-to-hand combat. Along with superhuman strength, stamina, durability, and reflexes, she was a trained soldier and a deadly combatant. Mera was a Zebalian born to King Reyes and his wife. Zebul was once one of the 7 Atlantean kingdoms until the event that swallowed the continent into the deep. Eventually, the continent was split off and considered Atlantis as their enemy. As a child, she grew up hating Atlantis and believed that it did not deserve such beauty and luxury. After the death of her mother, she was raised by King Reyes and later forged into a perfect warrior by Leron, King Reyes' chief taskmaster. She was also taught the secrets of hydrokinesis. Mera was promised to be married to a military chief Nereus after she conducted the assassination of the king of Atlantis. Her father also gave her the Shell of Sounds, containing a message from her deceased mother that she had listened to once she reached the surface. Mera arrived on land in search of Arthur and was taken aback after finding out that he was a hero and not a tyrant. She had arrived with a bitter hatred in her heart, which turned into admiration after she saw Arthur rescuing wounded whales. The two met for lunch, and that was when she recalled listening to her mother's message. The message stated that Mera should choose a path of her own instead of following the demands of her kingdom. It was enough for Mera to discard all hatred for Arthur and fall in love with him. She fought alongside Arthur against the Trench and Ocean Masters during the invasion of the surface. She eventually became the Queen of Atlantis, along with superhuman strength, stamina, durability, reflexes, and senses. Mera's unique ability was hydrokinesis, which she could use to gain complete control over water. She was a highly trained combatant who could leap as high as 2 kilometers in the air. Mera had a genius-level intellect and strong leadership qualities. She wielded a fragment of Tear of Extinction, which had a potential to kill gods. She channeled it into a scabbard and the clarion in order to use it as a weapon. The character of Mera was created by Jack Miller and Nick Cardy and introduced in 2011's Aquaman, Volume 7, Issue 1. Andrina Curry. Introduced in 2020's Aquaman Volume 8, Issue 57, Andrina Curry was a creation of Kelly Sue DeConnick and Robson Rocha. When Mera revealed to Arthur about being pregnant, he panicked and sought to leave in order to process the news. This infuriated Mera, and in a fit of rage, she killed him. After going through an adventure of meeting ancient sea gods on the mystical island of Unspoken Water, Arthur was resurrected and he settled on Amnesty Bay. Mera was living in Atlantis until Black Manta destroyed an ancient Atlantean historical site to draw her attention. After arriving on the surface, Mera met Aquaman and the two reconciled. Manta attacked them with his Mecha Manta, but Mera was able to defeat him with her hydrokinetic powers. However, the extensive use of her powers led to her fall into a state of coma, and she was rushed to Atlantean Hospital by Aquaman. She gave birth to a girl, and while she was in a coma, Arthur took the child to live with him on the surface. Arthur named her Andy, and the two lived happily amongst friends. They also made frequent sneaky visits to Atlantis to see her comatose mother. Meanwhile, Orm planned to kidnap Andy and instigated a war between Velko and Arthur. Linneo was tasked to take Andy and leave her to be adopted by surface dwellers, but he instead hid her in a sunken shipwreck as she developed a liking for this young child. On land, Aquaman, Tula, and Aqualad used the remains of Mecha Manta to locate Andy and rescue her. Arthur handed Andy to Wee and went for Orm. He defeated Orm and abolished the monarchy, and soon after, Mera also recovered. Andy reunited with her parents in Amnesty Bay, who also got married. Andy possessed the powers of an Atlantean, owing to her father's heritage and hydrokinesis from her Zebalian mother. Arthur Curry Jr. We are all aware of the New Earth, which is the mainstream reality of the DC multiverse between the periods of Crisis and Infinite Earths and Flashpoint. In this reality, Arthur and Mera had a son whom they named Arthur Curry Jr. However, the baby had a short life after Black Manta murdered him by suffocation. Created by Nick Cardy, Arthur Curry Jr., aka Aquababy, was introduced in 1965's Aquaman issue 23, and his death was shown in Adventure Comics issue 452, released in August 1977. Aquababy received Atlantean physiology from his father and the ability to control water from Mera. After the death of Aquababy, Mera and Arthur parted ways. Koryak. In the reality of the New Earth, Aquaman at some point had a brief relationship with an Inuit woman named Keiko. She gave birth to a son and raised him in secret in her remote village in northern Canada. She named the boy Koryak and raised him without any knowledge of his Atlantean heritage. Koryak was introduced to Aquaman during his teenage years, and the meeting turned sour due to his rash attitude and temper. It resembled that of Arthur during his youth. Koryak, at some point, grew furious at the close relationship of Aquaman with Tempest and took residence in Atlantis. Going against his father, Koryak led to massive expeditions of Atlantis on the capital city of Poseidonus and the Tunnel of Tritonus, its sister city. His actions released the cruel Kordax, eventually bringing great danger to Atlantis. Following his reckless acts, Koryak was banished and returned to his mother with great shame. During the events of the Infinite Crisis, when Eclipse manipulated Spectre to destroy all magic from the universe, it destroyed all Atlanteans along with Koryak. Years later, a memoryless Atlantean named Norwal orchestrated the death of the Dweller of the Depths so as to resurrect Urlok. When Mera found him, she stated that Norwal had an uncanny resemblance to the deceased Koryak. Eventually, Koryak's body was found missing, and it was revealed that Norwal was actually Koryak. The character of Koryak was created by Peter David and Jim Calafor and introduced in Aquaman Volume 5, Issue 5, released in January 1995. Aquaman ancestors. Hailing from the bloodline of the Royal Atlanteans, Arthur had a list of legendary ancestors. They were Atlan. Created by Peter David, Esteban Marato, Atlan was introduced in 2013's Aquaman Volume 7, Issue 17. Centuries ago, when Atlan ruled Atlantis, he wanted to expand his leadership, which eventually led to the growth of Atlantis into 7 different kingdoms. He had a brother named Orin, who firmly opposed Atlan's open race policy, believing it to be harmful to the Atlantean bloodline. He waged war against Atlan, wounded him severely, and killed his wife and children. Returning to the oceans, Atlan spent years forging 7 weapons using alchemist's gold. Stricken with grief after the news of his assassinated family, Atlan used the scepter to sink Atlantis, destroying most of its kingdoms except Atlantis, the Trench, and the kingdom of Zebul. Following this, he fell into a magical sleep for centuries until Vulko resurrected him. Atlan attempted to destroy Atlantis, but his might fell short before the strength and willpower of Aquaman. Atlan gave up and melted into the magma of fresh lava and died. His death was showcased at Aquaman Volume 7, Issue 25. Atlan was an ancient Atlantean and possessed a wide array of magical abilities. He possessed immortality, living for centuries. Along with his superhuman strength, stamina, durability, and reflexes, Atlan was an expert in hand-to-hand combat and possessed a genius-level intellect, along with sound knowledge of occultism, science, and architecture. Orin. Showcased in 2013's Aquaman Volume 7, Issue 24, Orin was the brother of Atlan. As mentioned earlier, Orin was against Atlan's policy of including all races to dwell equally. He believed that interbreeding would be harmful to the true Atlantean bloodline. Orin waged war against his brother and even killed his family in his absence. Later, when Atlan returned, he destroyed Atlantis and the 7 kingdoms, which led to the death of Orin and his family. Kula. Kula was also an ancestor of the Atlantean royal family and existed even before Atlan. The character was created by Paul Kupperberg and Jan Dosema and introduced in Aquaman Volume 3, Issue 16, released in May 2017. There's not much known of him, except that he was the rival god to Dark Maestra and Poseidon. However, he later married Maestra, who bore him a son, Aran. Maestra. As mentioned earlier, Maestra was the wife of Kula and the mother of Aran. The character was created by Paul Kupperberg and Jan Dosema and introduced in Aran Lord Atlantis Issue 4, released in February 1983. However, following the Prime Earth continuity, Maestra made her first appearance in Byron Hitch and Fernando Pasarin's Justice League Volume 3, Issue 16, released in May 2017. Although there is little known about Maestra, it is believed she created the Zodiac crystals, ancient Atlantean gemstones with mystical properties. Arian. Making his debut in Secret 6, Volume 4, Issue 8, released in January 2016, Arian was the son of Kula and Maestra. Arian was one of the ancient Atlanteans and a legendary hero of both Atlantean and Amazon folklore. He was born as the Lord of Order. Arian was there to defend Earth and Atlantis when the evil dark giants attacked Earth and hunted humans for recreation. Arian spun ancient magic in the center of the Earth's core to seal away the giants forever. Poseidon developed a liking for Arian and took him as his protege. Poseidon taught him about the ways of the world and how Earth was blessed with life and life force. Arian wanted to share the power with the other worlds and bind them together, but Poseidon began growing jealous of him. He lied to Arian, stating that the 3 sea gods were ruthless conquerors who would only bring harm to their world. Arian was disappointed, and he used his magic and technology to use a small segment of his power to create the Tear of Extinction. As mentioned earlier, the Tear of Extinction could kill gods, and Arian used it to decimate the ocean lords and cast them into the graveyard of gods. Following this, Arian vanished from Atlantis. Sometime later, in ancient Egypt, he met Dr. Fate and the blue beetle scarab. He wanted to claim it for himself, and it led to a long battle with Dr. Fate. Arian was presumably dead and later resurrected by Merlin as the Sapphire Knight. The character was created by Paul Kupperberg and Jan Duursema. Marvelous verdict. So, we have finally come to the end of our video, and we hope that you liked our content. Aquaman certainly has one of the most royal bloodlines. Most members of his family were elite warriors or ancient royal Atlanteans. Feel free to add comments about your favorite Atlantean in the list, and how you wish to see them in live-action movies. With that, we will be concluding today's video, and stay tuned for the next marvelous video.